People who have come close to dying, what were your last thoughts? So, for me, I was thinking, crap, was it the car that hit me white? As I'm looking down at a car underneath me, I'd been hit hard enough I bounced up over the car that hit me and had enough airtime to clear the second one. Props to the driver of the third vehicle, though, because he must have stood on the damn brakes the moment he saw me, because he brought the cement truck to a stop before it got to me. Then, second time around, I was hit by a car as a pedestrian. I'm now much more careful crossing streets. Not that it's helped much, though. I seem to have a car magnet in my ass. Next story. Funny, for a lack of better word, I have a story here. When I was 10, my family went to Florida on vacation with some other extended family. There was a plan where my parents went back home to Massachusetts for a few days before my brother and I, so we could stay longer with my aunts and cousins. It was my first time traveling with just my older brother and my second time on a plane, the first time being the trip over there. So coming into Logan Airport, our airplane started to fall out of the sky. Quite literally. Apparently, it only happened for about 3 to 5 seconds, but the pressure made the oxygen masks fall from the ceiling. I'd seen enough movies at that point to know that basically, we were going to die. I was for sure crying and freaking out like everyone else on the aircraft. For sure, the most frightening experience of my life, bar none. But I distinctly remember thinking to myself, man, I'm never gonna get to finish my Age of Empires 2 campaign. So, yeah, a video game was ostensibly my last thought. Next story. So, a little over 10 years ago, I had the Widowmaker heart attack. I spent the first day in the hospital with a balloon pump assisting my heart to help me stay alive until they could perform the surgery the next day. They told my wife that my chances of surviving were only about 20%. I had the priest in, family, the whole 9 yards. In the morning, as they wheeled me into the operating room, I was doing the Monty Python bit going, "And get the machine that goes ping in case the administrator comes by," with the surgical nurse, who is also a Monty Python fan. And the look on the surgeon's face was priceless, and I was chuckling as I went under. My last thoughts were, we got this. And the surgeon later told me that I was the only patient in his entire career that came into the operating room laughing, but that my attitude may have been a large factor in my survival. Next story. I was in the process of being electrocuted, having been working all day atop of a scissors lift. The electricians, they had left a 277-volt line live, and while I was standing and reaching while running the last low-voltage run of the job, I contacted their line. I saw the white light at the end of the tunnel. All I knew was throbbing and 60-cycle noise and the white light. My last thought was, I wonder if I can tell my knees to unlock. And obviously, they did, since I'm here typing this. Several electrical burns, but still here living the life. Next story. My heart stopped beating for 7 seconds while I was eating dinner in my hospital bed, waiting to be discharged. I realized I was going to pass out and put my arm across my plate so I wouldn't fall face first into it. And all I could think of was, this is gonna make a mess. Glad they took their time with the paperwork, though. Ended up walking out of there 7 days later with a pacemaker at the age of 46. Edit. I'm 57 and retired now, by the way. Still have a fib and can't do much of anything without becoming totally exhausted. Nothing seems to work. Now that I have the time, I don't have the energy to do much at all, so just gonna write it out and call it a day. Next story. I thought to myself, they will never find me. I almost drowned in Hawaii in a riptide and nobody noticed. I was 10 years old. Thankfully, though, I was a very strong swimmer, and I managed to swim out of it, but I was quite a ways out. You see, the beach was very narrow, close in with rocks on each side, so I basically had to get pitted by a huge wave at the end to get through the last 20 yards. I crawled up the beach literally exhausted. Got yelled at for staying out too long. Edit. As everyone says, learn riptide and current safety. Don't fight it and swim sideways if possible. Strongly consider PFDs if you're not a strong swimmer. And that doubly applies in rivers, but that's for another day. Unfortunately, I don't remember where this was. It was 1988, and I think it was a small hotel beach. But thanks for all the comments and upvotes. My first one over 250. Also, please take your children as early as possible for swimming lessons. I learned when I was 3 or 4 and undoubtedly saved my own life several times by being a strong swimmer. Next story. I was 16 years old. I had my lower right wisdom tooth come in and it broke the tooth next to it. That caused an abscess which led to an infection in my jawbone. I was taken to the ER by my mother because she thought I had some sort of lockjaw because I couldn't open my mouth. It was so swollen. The doctor told her that I couldn't be treated there, and so I was ambulanced to another hospital an hour away. I remember slipping in and out of consciousness, getting prepped for the surgery, and having my dad there. The last thing I remember thinking was that I didn't want to go yet. I would make so many people devastated if I died. I remember crying before, and my dad just calmed me down and told me he loved me. I recovered in the hospital for a month, got a visit from my then boyfriend, now husband, missed high school finals for that year, and was discharged on Christmas Eve. Next story. I had the worst strain of mono currently known, strep throat, double ear infection, upper respiratory flu, lower respiratory flu, a sinus infection, and pink eye, all at the same time. They started testing me for a brain tumor before they knew what was going on in the ER. My vision started fading and I couldn't hear, and the only thing I could think about was that I was going to ruin my parents', siblings, friends, and girlfriends' lives by dying so young and sudden. I didn't want to cause that kind of emotional pain to my loved ones. I thought I wasn't going to be able to say goodbye. I was so dehydrated that my organs were starting to shut down. Had I waited another day to go to the ER, I would have died from total organ failure. My body was making so many white blood cells that my counts were higher than some of the nurses and doctors had ever seen in their professional career. I was administered 3 separate sacks, you could call it, or fluids. They were keeping me alive at the time. They gave me a huge amount of prednisone, over 200 milligram doses. I was high as a kite for a week. I don't remember much from that week, but somehow I got home with my parents, lived on smoothies, and slept a lot. I even managed to play Apex and win matches, and I don't even remember doing it. They forced me to drink like 2 to 3 liters of water a day. I discharged a lot of phlegm. The week passed, and the prednisone wiped out my flu and helped my body fight off my mono symptoms. But steroids can make bacterial infections like strep, ear infections, and pink eye feel worse. I couldn't speak for 2 weeks. And after the steroids, I was put on an extremely powerful antibiotic and had to stay home for another 3 to 4 days because it completely wiped out the good bacteria in my body. After 3 weeks from visiting the ER, I went back to college, and 5 weeks later, I finished the semester with a 3.4, so pretty effing proud of myself. Next story. I was gridlocked in traffic with a wildfire on both sides of my vehicle. I couldn't even touch the window, it was that hot. Our cell tower was knocked out too, so I couldn't even tell my family and friends that weren't in the car that I loved them. And I just sat there, and I was oddly peaceful. There was nothing I could do. My whole family was sweating, my little brother was crying. I was 15, and I just sat there and accepted that my life was what it was, and I didn't bother thinking about what I wished I had done differently or what I wanted to accomplish because it didn't matter. I was convinced I would die quietly with my family in a car. I couldn't think. I put my headphones in and played my favorite songs, thinking maybe I could die to one of those. When traffic started moving again after a few hours, I could barely stay awake. I remember the first time I showered after the fire. There was soot running down the drain, and I just cried. Since then, I started telling people I loved them. I decided to live for myself. I came out. I walked towards a future. I even sat at my first bonfire this year, and that was terrible though. Next story. When I was like 11 years old, I was home alone one day during the summer, just watching TV while eating Skittles. I liked to put a bunch in my mouth and make like a Skittle ball that I would chew on. Something on the show I was watching, well, it made me laugh and I swallowed the ball, which got lodged in my throat. I then experienced a few seconds of sheer terror because I realized that there was nobody here to help me at all, and I was probably going to die. Thankfully, I remembered some cartoon or movie where someone jammed their stomach on a chair and got something unstuck from their throat. So I lunged at the corner of the recliner as hard as I could with my stomach, and it actually worked and popped the small ball out. It was super lucky because I really had no idea what I was doing, but one of the worst feelings I have ever experienced. Definitely never ate Skittles that way again after that, and to this day, I'm still a bit paranoid about eating certain things when alone. Next story. I remember each handful of pills going down so easily, like simply swallowing a mouthful of food. It surprised me as I was one who normally struggled to take more than a single pill at a time, but I wasn't struggling this time though. I had downed a cocktail consisting of 6 handfuls of small mixes of medications. It took a moment before anything came to mind. Everything was so quiet. The silence was almost deafening. My mind became foggy, my stomach suddenly queasy, my legs and arms felt oh so tremendously heavy, shaky. As I tried to get up, I started to feel my heart beating. It had a change in pace from normal and was loud like thunder pulsating in my ears. The first thing I managed to mumble out after fumbling to call my best friend on the phone was, I effed up. But today marks 4 years since making it out of the psychiatric ward for my attempted overdose. I'm still alive, and it feels good. Next story. So, I have something wrong with my health where medications are a hard effing no for me. OD'd on a normal dose of albuterol, OD'd on a normal dose of promethazine, some other effed up occurrences that I don't even care to speak about, but anyway. When I OD'd on promethazine, my fever shot through the effing roof, 105 to 106, and it wouldn't go away. I was in and out of consciousness consciousness and my wife said I was talking in my sleep a lot. I legitimately, 100%, without a shred of doubt in my mind, thought I was in the middle of a war between us humans and effing elves. I was talking about how we had to split the house with them to prevent another war, etc. My breathing was effed up, my fever wouldn't go away, I couldn't get up, I couldn't actually sleep. Nothing. So, my last thoughts were basically, hopefully the elves are cool splitting the kitchen because we need to eat still. And it was a really effed up time. Next story. A year and a half ago, I broke my neck in a skiing accident. Lying there, I couldn't move or feel anything, and I thought, I may be a quadriplegic for the rest of my life. Wait, I might not even make it. Then, letting that sink in for a minute, I surveyed the expanse of my life in my mind's eye, thinking, wow, I've had an amazing, bizarre, exciting, fascinating life. I'd like some more time, but if this is it, I'm okay with that. I'm so grateful for the life I've had. Then, an immense wave of peace and gratitude swept over me, and I thought, Lord, I've done the best I could. I hope that's enough. All I ask is that you take me in your arms. Then the sound of skis and the ski patrol arrived, and today I have recovered 98% of my pre-accident abilities. Next story. At 14, I almost drowned after getting caught in the waves on a beach trip. After fighting as hard as I could, huge mistake, I was lying on the bottom in the sand, and I had two thoughts. One, Mom and Dad are going to be so mad. And two, I can't believe that I can't even save myself. I had recently completed a junior life-saving course which was pool-based and didn't cover swimming in the ocean. What I didn't realize, though, was that I had been pushed into shore by the waves and was in 4 feet of water at that point. My friend saw me and just pulled me out. Next story. In retrospect, I never actually did come close to dying, but I didn't know that. So, I was flying an airplane, alone over a big lake. Engines started acting up. I radioed it in. Few seconds later, came sputtering and then silence. Prop airplanes are loud. The silence, it's deafening. And I clearly said over my comms, Houston flight, this is November 4, 951 Alpha. I've lost my engine. And Houston comes back and says, 51 Alpha, say again. So I did. 51 Alpha, repeating, I've lost my engine. And there was a brief, but only very brief moment of panic. After that, I did everything I've been taught and eventually got the plane safely on the ground. So, like I said, I never actually was going to die, I guess? But there was that moment where I was sure I'd end up at the bottom of that lake. Honestly, though, my thoughts were just, how the F do I fix this? Next story. Alright, so a little late to the game, and I've posted this one before, I think, but nurse told me, you're gonna be here when you get back, okay? And I just kind of brushed it off with a yeah. And then she looked me straight in the eyes and said, no, you're going to still be here when I get back, right? And the way she said it just rocked me. All I could think was, I gotta stay awake. I gotta stay here. I didn't know it at the time, but all of my organs were crashing, and I still credit her for saving my life that night. Okay, everybody, that was a pretty short, nice, straightforward story, but we're missing the part where they got married at the end. This is where OP says, and now we've been married for 10 years. Where's that part? We need romance in these videos. I don't know. I'm just yapping now. Next story. So here's my story. 6th grade, end of year trip. We were at a ropes course park where you'd rock climb and walked across tall catwalks and the like. I was attached to a relay with a team of my classmates 30 feet below me. I climbed up the pole and chickened out when I got to the top, so I signaled my teacher and she gave me the signal to lean back and I'd be rappelled down. Well, this is why you look before you leap, folks, because these kids were not paying attention, and I dropped off that catwalk like I had never been there. And as I fell through the air with the ground running up to meet me, I saw this absolutely beautiful, and I mean breathtaking burst of light through the trees in front of me. Something like the sunshine you'd see coming through the leaves of a tree that you're lazing under on a hot summer day. I was just so taken aback by the sight that would have been my last thought. Christ, is that ever beautiful? But before I could finish that thought, my fellow classmates reefed on that rappel rope and I stopped falling. My mom, she had just died maybe 6 months prior to this, and I was convinced it was her, a guardian angel, whatever you want to call it. Spooky crap though. Bye. Next story. I thought to myself, just keep talking and maybe he won't shoot it. There was a gun pointed at my face. I kept talking and he finally put it down. That was 40 years ago and I still remember the terror to this day. Edit. Alright, context. So, high school buddy picked me and a friend up to go to a party. On the drive over, it turns out he's wanting to take his own life, and he's feeling homicidal maybe, wasn't quite sure which, and he had grabbed his dad's gun. He parked the car, pulled the gun out, and pointed it at me, and demanded to know why he should not kill all of us. I thought fast and started giving him reasons and asking him questions. He had that gun on me for what seemed like an eternity. Finally, though, he lowered it and said, "Okay," then took us back to my place and dropped us off and drove away. I never did find out what happened, but he never went back to school. I suspect he was hospitalized, though. Next story. I tried to hang myself a few years ago. I was drinking, but I wasn't drunk, and while I was planning it for a while, I didn't plan to do it that night. Just sort of seemed like a good last day. So I used my work belt, tied a knot to jam into my bedroom door. I kicked a small stool out from under me, and I remember thinking, good, this is it, you deserve this. And I remember my legs were trashing while I fought the urge to try to reach for the stool. Then nothing. I woke up on the floor, my neck, my toes, and my back were incredibly sore, and I have no idea how long I was out. Turns out the belt buckle couldn't support my weight and flew across the room. I couldn't find it for a month. Next story. I had been rushed back to the hospital after tonsillectomy as an artery had been opened. I was hemorrhaging and waiting for the surgeon to show up. I knew I was about to pass out, and I said to myself, of course, this is how you die. Shaking my head in disappointment, shooting blood out of my throat like a horror movie. Then passed out, surgery went well, but I code blued in recovery as I had clotting in my lungs. CPR, back to life, intubated, then ICU. Woke up 2 days later and had no clue what happened. Life has been better on every level since, though. Basically, I get another go at life. Very grateful. Next story. Not sure this is near death, but it was definitely an oh crap, we're about to die moment. In high school, I was driving around with two friends. I can't remember if the driver only had a school permit, but we used to drive everywhere, or right after we turned 16, and we were on a gravel road. My friend, the driver, has ADHD or ADD, and I was always designated as the front passenger when I was in the car because I was the responsible one, and my job was to grab the steering wheel and make sure we didn't drive off the road or crash into anything when he got distracted and forgot to steer. And as a parent, that's so terrifying now. But I happened to be in the back seat that time, and he was distracted and driving fast and didn't notice the turn in the road. He slammed the brakes, jerked the wheel, which sent us sliding, and all I could think was, he overcorrected. Next story. I just have to make it up the hill. Pick your crap up, dumbass, and get walking. This is no way to effing die. You see, I was longboarding and have been doing so since I was like 7 for over a decade. My parents were at a wedding, so I was home alone and fell about halfway between my house and work. It's a straight line, so I decided to go to my work instead of home. I don't take serious situations seriously, so I was gonna just bandage it up and go to sleep. Doctors told me I would have died if I did. Major split on my temple and my whole face was covered in blood. Multiple stitches in the ER later and I got to go home. This was 3 months ago and I just hit my face on concrete again last week. I think it's time to buy a helmet. So it seems like OP is 17, 18, I don't know, a young man. But I feel like you should always have a helmet. So if you're like OP, if Darby Allin or Jeff Hardy is a role model of yours, buy a helmet. Just, let's keep your face pretty and beautiful and scar-free. And also, this is the United States. Let's just try to avoid going to the hospital if we can prevent it, okay? I'm trying to help you out. Wear a freaking helmet. Anyway, next story. So, at the ages of 6 and 9, my sister and I didn't realize a section of beach we went to had flagged sections for swimmers, surfers, and no swim sections. We were collecting shells when we saw bigger ones further under the surf. We went deeper and deeper until we were swept out in a riptide. My sister was floating okay, but I was trying too hard and got tired quickly. I tried to cling to my big sister, but she kept pushing me off. My head stopped bobbing above the water and I started to drown. My panicked last thoughts were, I'm gonna drown, and my sister is going to let me die. Thankfully, a lifeguard spotted us and got us out, and I was okay except for a bit of salt water in my lungs. I know my sister was only trying to stay afloat, but at the time it looked as if though she was trying to kill me. Next story. There goes the breathing. There goes the sight. My heart's gonna be next. At least I'm warm. So, my blood glucose was less than 20 and had gotten that way while I was asleep. I'd been a type 1 diabetic for over 20 years by then, so it wasn't my first, but it was definitely my worst. One of the aforementioned things must have jolted my ass awake in my warm bed, and I thrashed around violently until I could get to my phone and call 911. I laid there under the blankets with those thoughts. Sure, I was feeling those things, and I lost consciousness again. I came to full of IV lines and electrodes, surrounded by paramedics. Their response time saved my ass. And I wear a Dexcom now. No more scary sugar crashes for me. Next story. The closest to death I came was earlier this year. I had abnormal uterine bleeding that was so severe I couldn't keep unconscious. I fainted 4 times in less than 12 hours, threw up while I was unconscious twice. Luckily, I was sitting up when I woke back up, so I didn't choke. The one time I felt like I was dreaming, but it wasn't a flashing before your eyes kind of dream. It was just like a dreaming of a normal mundane event. I was so unconscious I got hit in REM mode, I suppose. As the day went on, I eventually got to the point where I couldn't get up off the bathroom floor. I couldn't even sit up or I would have passed out again. An ambulance was called and I was taken out on a stretcher. I only had a vague awareness of what was going on around me. I had a very strong urge to sleep, but I knew that I shouldn't. But I just kept wanting to close my eyes. My best friend, who was there at the time, kept nudging me so that I didn't before the ambulance arrived. I was so out of it, I no longer felt fear or much awareness, just that I felt like sleeping. But it didn't feel like something good would happen if I did sleep. Once I got to the ER, I was told that my hemoglobin count was 4.6 and was dropping fast. One of the nurses told me point blank if I hadn't come in, I would have most likely died. I had to be given multiple blood transfusions to even be stabilized. Uterine fibroids are no joke. Next story. I know I'm a little late and not many people will see this, but when I was 15 at a party and I was significantly drunk and so was everyone else, not the US obviously, this dude, probably 2 years older at me, so like 17, pulls a gun on me. A full-on gun is pointed at my stomach, and he says, "Do you want to effing die?" And I can tell he's pretty wasted as well, so I actually kind of freaked out. I played it off like, haha, not today, man. But the whole time I was thinking, I'm about to get shot, and everyone here is going to watch me die, and that's going to be really embarrassing. So yeah, even in the face of death, I was still a really self-conscious, awkward child. Next story. It ended up being a false alarm, but I was at a movie theater about 30 minutes into Magic Mike with my mom and godmother. First theater to the right of the movie house. Suddenly, a young woman comes in shouting, "They're shooting! They're shooting!" And everyone in my party hits the deck. We're closest in our row to the aisle, meaning if a shooter were to come in and walk up, we're right there. In that moment, I actively thought, what would be best for my family? Mainly my literal brother who was just into middle school. I subtly placed myself over my mom, positioned myself in a way that wasn't obvious to her, but if someone came in the theater, I'd easily be able to cover her. It was terrifying, but I distracted myself from the fear by thinking logically about my loved ones. Even after when everyone got up and positioned themselves by the exit/behind the projector screen, I wasn't even scared anymore. More focused on my goal if things went south, which was to protect my mother. Next story. I'm so fat. Why are these people trying to force me to eat? I don't need food to live. Food is obsolete. All it does is make me more fat. You see, guys, I had bulimic anorexia for 5 years at that point and was too underweight to really walk. I would faint regularly and my cognitive skills were very poor. I later found a Christmas card I had made, and the letters weren't even the right way around. I was in the hospital and all I did was sit in the warm shower because I was so cold all the time. They told me I had a couple of months to live. I refused to eat, but now 4 years later, I'm pretty okay. It took a specialized hospital and 3 months of expensive care to save me, and while an eating disorder never really goes away completely from the mind, I'm much better now. It's scary how my mind distorted how I viewed my body so completely. I was a skeleton, and all I saw was fat. Next story. Late to the thread here, blah, 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 but former heroin addict/dealer here. I dealt for about half-ish of the decade I used, and being a small blonde girl in New Mexico, I used a lot of my guy friends to drive me around and make me sales in exchange to keep me safe, while I kept them not dope sick. Well, one of these dudes especially didn't care much more than getting his daily dope, and I had recently been prescribed Klonopin. I barely remember about a week of combining the two. Don't do it, guys. Before this happened, I'd always shoot up, then pop a Klonopin and just wake up in my own back seat for updates and sales. It's funny how safe you can feel with the scummiest of scum while high as a kite. So I guess I'd been on this train of shoot up H and pop some K and just nod in my own back seat. That the current dude, he caught on and told another girl he fancied. I last remember her getting in the front passenger seat, my friend being the driver, me being in the back seat to lay out like a dumbass addict with too much confidence, and I remember her introducing herself politely because I had just made a big sale and my friend got his cut and was going to share it with a lady friend. And I remember thinking, I'll join you, and cooked up a shot as well, even though like 10 minutes prior I had snorted some of my benzos. The last thing I remember, after that, my friend and his girlfriend laughing and offering me chocolate and being like, F yeah, I love Hershey's with almonds. Those were my last thoughts. F yeah, I love Hershey's with almonds. Then my friend and gal ended up ditching me in the back of my car when I became unresponsive. but I happened to be in a part of town where an actual friend noticed my car and found me and saved my life. I was basically dead, covered in chocolate, half naked in the back of my own car. I can only, to this day, hope the half-naked part was just me being high as a kite in skimpy clothes and not adjusting them while rolling around in the bed that was my backseat. Next story. I've actually cheated in death situations where I should have died several times, but this is the one that I remember the best. I got into an ATV accident. I crashed into a boulder and I went flying and landed on my head. I felt like it was the end, and my life actually did flash before my eyes. I felt like I had a good life and didn't have any major regrets. I was ready to go. Obviously, I didn't end up dying, but I very easily could have. I still think back on that and realize, along with the other times I've cheated death, that I must still have a purpose. Next story. I had anaphylactic shock, and the only thing I thought was, finally. Automobile accident on the freeway. A mixture between, this isn't my car, oh no, and please be quick. Lost control of my car on a rural motorway in the middle of that night and managed to steer off the road and not incoming traffic, thinking, please don't hit anyone. I wasn't injured, but I had a knife pulled on me by a kid trying to mug me, and I pulled out my knife and squared up to fight. He ran, and afterwards I thought, I carry an old wallet with $17 in it for this very reason. That wouldn't have been worth it. Next story. I yelled to my friends, I'm fine, while my life flashed before my literal eyes. My heart felt like it swelled, and I swear my brain thought I was dead for a moment. I hit a tree riding uphill and ended up hanging upside down with my disabled, unmovable foot wedged in my saddle stirrup on the wrong side of my saddle, on the wrong side of a steep hill on my horse that frequently fell over when unbalanced, while not wearing a helmet. Weeks later, I sat up in bed and cried when it hit me I had absolutely accepted, in that moment, that I was going to die. Getting caught up hanging might have saved me from a broken neck. Next story. I was in an Afghanistan village. My MOS was an electrical engineer, and we'd go from village to build small schools or clinics to win hearts and minds, end quote. One such time, we came under fire from some enemies about 400 to 500 yards away, and both sides opened up. In the crossfire about 50 yards from my line, I noticed two kids had been playing and were laying behind a small rock in between the crossfire, screaming. I don't know why, but without thinking, I dropped my rifle and I ran out to them, picked up the small boy, took the girl's hand, and started running back to safety with them. About 10 yards out from a small wall, and hence safety, I felt like an elephant had drop-kicked me in the back. All the air was forced out of my lungs, and I was pushed forward to the ground. I'd been hit in the back. My last thoughts were, at least I died saving kids. Pretty good way to go. Thought of Milo, the family Labrador, and how much I missed him. How temporary this life is, like a blink of the eye compared to what comes after. Then I noticed the girl was pulling my hand, pulling me back into reality, bullets still whizzing through the air. I realized that the bullet had hit me in my plate, and I was okay. Besides the fractured ribs, I suddenly felt the pain from it. It doled from adrenaline. I got up on my feet, got to safety with the girl. Due to 2 broken ribs, got to pretty much skate the rest of my deployment, though. Next story. I'm a physician. About 20 months ago, I got up from a nap Sunday in the evening, had a searing pain in my abdomen, and felt my legs go under me. Remember 1 or 2 things: paramedics, doctor putting in a venous line, then absolutely nothing at all for 6 days. I came to briefly and couldn't move or talk. I wondered if I was in hell, people walking on the walls and roof and harassing me all the time. Then I really dropped out. No last thoughts or visions, I just didn't exist. At that time, the doctors told my wife I was going to die. Came to a few days later and recognized my wife and son. I had post-mortem lividity on my arms, back, and legs. I'm a pathologist and have only seen that appearance at autopsies. I figured I must have been pretty close to death. You see, I had had an acute gallbladder infection with antibiotic resistance, septicemia, septic shock, and multi-organ failure. They removed my gallbladder and I came out of ICU on day 17. Next story. Okay, I know it's not likely necessary considering the context here, but trigger warning for this. So, like someone else commented, I got food stuck in my throat and legitimately thought I was done for. I had made a cheap-ass dollar pizza, you know, those spongy pizzas, and I had cut it into 4 pieces. Well, the first piece I put into my mouth was not sufficiently chewed because I was distracted by playing BioShock. I swallow the whole piece and immediately regret the decision. I'm full on choking in nanoseconds, like vision is closing off, no air is getting past the pizza, my limbs are truly weak. Any strength I had prior to this moment was monumentally depleting at a rapid rate. Choking there, in a back room of the house, alone, no phone for multiple rooms. This was before the true advent of teenagers having cell phones, or I was just too poor for that. And now I'm in a stage of uncontrollable gulping. It was unavoidable, as my body just took over trying to resolve the problem by clearing my esophagus. I remember pushing tears thinking I'm going to die from an effing penny pizza after surviving my self-unalive attempt a few months previous. I was writing a new lease on life before the pizza and felt this hot wave of just serious dread, thinking I was going to lose everything, and my friends were going to find my decomposing body at their house. I remember thinking how much it would damage their psychology before I found myself slamming my ribcage on the back support of the chair I had been sitting in. 2 tries, 3 tries, 4 tries. I slammed the 5th on the pointed corner of the chair. They were like castle spires, and it was a perfect match for not only shifting the pizza in my throat, but also causing a severe vomiting response. I felt the pizza slice come up, and I vomited everywhere. And then I laid on the floor for just short of an hour, crying. It was an awful experience. I never told anyone, and I spent about 4 hours cleaning that room to make sure no evidence would ever be found of my incident. I haven't thought about it in years, but it was definitely a formative experience because I now focus very heavily on chewing my food, and I am a very slow eater nowadays. TLDR and pro-life tip, chew your effing food thoroughly. Y'all, let me tell you, I was a fast eater, just scarfing it down. I don't want to say scarfing, but I was just like, I'm hungry, I want to eat, I want it now, so I would eat fast. But anyway, when I moved out for the first time, I don't know if my mom mentioned it or something, but it really got into my head that if I choke, it's Jover. Like, yeah, I could do the chair thing, but also, what if I'm not, like, able to succeed and I die? That would suck. So after moving out and living alone for by myself for the first time, I realized I gotta slow down. So now I eat at a steady pace, still fast, but like, I chew and swallow, okay? What was the point of this? I'm embarrassing myself. Next story. So, this was not me, but my mom. This was in 1971. When she was giving birth to me, she bled a lot. They gave her a transfusion of the wrong type of blood, and she had the whole warm white light loved ones waiting feeling. Before it was popularized, she'd never heard of a near-death experience before, and she thought about my sisters, 7, 10, and 11 years old, and knew they would be okay. Then she looked down, saw herself on the table, and me, and though intellectually she knows I was in the nursery by then, she thought, I can't leave that baby, then saw a nurse run in and yank the transfusion out of her arm. Then she was back in her body. To this day, she says she is not afraid of death, as it is lovely. Next story. So this is a long one, but when I was a junior in high school, I was dating a girl who had pretty bad depression. Every day was something new, and I was the one that had to solve that new problem, not her. I was also horrible at high school, as I was a kid that transferred from complete social anxiety to learning how to party and only doing that. I was failing high school. On top of that, my brother was a thieving drug addict, fully recovered. My mother, she worked full-time. Point is, everything in my life was stress. One day, though, everything hit me all at once. And funny enough, the straw that broke the camel's back was when my mom accidentally locked me out of the house in the middle of a deep Minnesota winter. I took all of that stress and turned it into pure rage, and felt as if the anger was melting the snow as it fell around me, as if I could literally feel my blood boil. I punched, kicked, and screamed as loud as I could and became very lightheaded. I passed out. I woke up sometime later in a snowbank in my driveway, and I was still very lightheaded and super warm. Like that incredibly comfy feeling once you wake up from the perfect sleep, the one where the blankets feel just right. After reflecting on that, I immediately realized I shouldn't be feeling that feeling right now. I'm lying in a snowbank. I proceeded to keep my head focused and started forcing my body to get up. My only goal in my mind, to knock on a neighbor's door. It felt like I was moving a ton of bricks as I walked. First neighbor, no answer. Second, none. I barely made it to my third and I collapsed on their doorstep. No answer. I didn't panic though, the entire time, and just kept thinking, keep moving, keep moving. I didn't really think much else. My mind and body was running at 1%. I managed to crawl over to one more neighbor's door, more scraping at it than I was knocking, and they opened the door, and I fell into their doorway. It was an old friend of my family's, so they knew me, and they picked me up and brought me into their living room, covering me in blankets and turned on an electric heater on my chest. That's when I finally felt okay, giving up. I woke up later with my mom nudging me awake, still on the neighbor's couch. I felt very weak still, nauseous and just disoriented. My mother brought me home and we sort of just brushed it off. I didn't feel good, but I wasn't dying, right? Over the next few days as I went to school, though, I felt weaker and weaker. So weak that I could barely keep my eyes open. Now, my mother is anti-doctor, not anti-vax, and we just kind of tried to have me sleep it off. We also live in the US, obviously, so anything to not go into debt with the doctor. As the days went on, I started developing a bad cough. My mind became hazy. Getting out of bed was too hard, and I became way too dizzy to even try. I became bedridden. I finally convinced my mother, though, to bring me to the doctor, and she decided to bring me to a minute clinic. The doctor looked at me, though, told me to open my mouth, and said, "You have strep throat. You'll be fine. Sleep it off." And I'm pretty sure she gave me some spray of some kind, and then I was off on my merry way. I head back to my bed, and that was it. I had never experienced that type of sickness, though, that I had experienced in those 2 weeks. I went from having a cough to my mind going numb. I lost weight, and simple thoughts were enough to tire me out for the day. That next morning, I mumbled to my mom that I needed to go to the doctor again. There really were no thoughts, I sort of just moved, my pale body covered in sickness, and I was just too weak to care. We go to an actual clinic, though, and the doctor takes one look in my throat, looks me in the eyes and says, "You need to go to the emergency room right now." And I finally knew I was dying. I just felt blank. I dabbled in my thoughts in my mind by myself, as my mother threw me into the correct directions. I get to the emergency room and I get a doctor who looks like he came directly out of a soap opera. He had skin-tight scrubs with a gold chain around his neck. He took a look at me and he told my parents that I had developed a peritonsillar abscess in my tonsils that was closing my throat. I had about the tip of a pen of room to breathe, and it was so infected it was shutting down my immune system. I was given 3 options: go in for an emergency tonsillectomy, try to sleep it off, or he would go in with a needle right now and suck the abscess out. He said the third option was really easy and quick, and I warned him that I am terrified of needles and have a very bad gag reflex, but he assured me that I would be fine. He numbed my throat, and I said I could still feel something. He became annoyed, though, and told me I was wrong. My mother, she warned him to wear a face mask, and the doctor told her, "Who's the doctor here?" We shut up. He stuck the needle in my throat and punctured the abscess. I gagged so hard, I retched, and he punctured the back of my throat, and I shot blood and pus all over his face. At this point, I don't remember much. My throat starts filling with blood and pus, and I'm throwing it up all over myself, too weak to roll over. My flight or fight response kicks in, and it sort of felt like I was just watching it as it happened. My mother rolls me over, and I'm puking it up all over the floor. At that moment, however, was when I was the most calm. I felt like I was a spirit watching over my already dead corpse, and I promised myself that I would appreciate everything and everyone around me, and that I would love more. I promised that I wouldn't get mad at the world like that, and I accepted it. I woke up, drugged out of my mind with an IV in my arm in a hospital bed, making it all the way to today. And this makes me cry as I write it because I became a totally different person as I woke up. I'm actually very happy it all happened to me because it made me discover what was really important in life. And I'm not giving a TLDR for this one because this story is that important to me. Next story. I miss my friends and my family so much. I'd do anything just to argue with my mom one more time, or listen to my best friend complain about his girlfriend, or clean up the torn paper towel roll my dog left all over the living room floor for me to clean up. If I could just get one more chance, I'll never do heroin or cocaine ever again. April 8th. 2018, around 6 p.m. Eastern Time, on the gurney, headed into the OR for emergency surgery to remove a fecal impaction that had perforated my sigmoid colon and torn the lining of it in half. I woke up 2 days later, intubated in ICU with a colostomy bag. Someone put a phone up to my head, and I heard my mom's voice, and I cried. Been sober completely for 21 months. Final semester of undergrad, and headed to PA school so I can do the same for others. Next story. I wanted my mom, dad, sister, friends, and extended family to know I loved them so much, and I was so sorry for not finishing university. I wanted my cat to know I was sorry I couldn't be there in the morning to give her her favorite can of food, lamb and sauce. I wanted my dog to know I was so sorry I couldn't take her to the pet store, her favorite place, and I couldn't take her there again. As I laid there, thinking I might die, I wished my boyfriend at the time could feel the pain I was in. He wouldn't even come to the hospital with me. My last thought was, I can't believe I've wasted almost 2 years on this. We broke up shortly after. Next story. Chronologically, mother had a shotgun held to her stomach during the robbery of a business while she was pregnant with me. No thoughts there, probably never would have followed through with it. Then, almost drowned at a pool at the age of 6-ish, but was saved by a vigilant watcher. No final thoughts. Nearly choked to death on a Garfield ravioli at around age 7. Grandmother punched me in the back and it launched out of my lungs. Ate it afterwards, I don't know. Age 9-ish, fever of 104.7 for a prolonged period of time. I had severe balance issues for a few months, but was glad to be out of school, unsure of the cause. 16-ish and dumb, somehow managed to dodge a herd of 10-ish deer while sleep-deprived and going 90 miles per hour. Kinda just carried on without thought. 19-ish, threatened by a group of unsavory individuals with the intent of essay and death for defying their advances after a drunken chance meeting in the woods. We had just enough people that it was unlikely, but easily could have gone badly in slightly less favorable circumstances. Was semi-upset but drunk and continued partying. Still annoys me not to be able to punish them. 22-ish hit an ice patch under a bridge going 70, did 2 full spins and rammed a taxi, ended up backwards in the center of a 3-lane highway. The salt truck went by just a few moments after, and I remember thinking the music I was playing was sick as I had that memory frozen, frames still standing in time. And everything was frozen until I hit them. 26-ish hit a cow in the head going 55 miles per hour. It was foggy. There were 3 cows across a 2-lane highway that had escaped from a nearby farm. I smashed that effer hard in the head. I imagine he was the most stupid cow alive after that, which is definitely saying something. My only thought was in all caps, "What the F?" as I saw my impending crash coming. 27, approached by a random male attempting to entice me into the woods next to my house. Apparently, he tried it multiple times with others within a week. I'm a poor target for that, and I had a dog. I don't know what he was thinking. Got caught pretty quick. I remember being confused, though, because my dog and 3 cats were acting strange. Then he approached, and I grabbed the dog by the scruff and got inside. And 28, going 75 on the interstate, crested a hill and reflexively slammed my wheel to the side at the sight of approaching headlights. Drunk driver. I didn't even look to see if I'd hit someone by changing lanes, just sheer reaction. Thanks, video games. No real thoughts besides the instant realization of that would have unquestionably killed me and immediately pulling over to call the police. And nothing new past that. I've probably got one coming though. Life isn't fun without death, right? Okay, everybody, so I have a few things to say about this story because what the hell? Okay, so most of y'all probably don't know this. I'm 28 and OP's saying all of this happened by the age of 28. I have had none of these things. This is why I have no relevant personal stories here. I haven't had my almost dying moment, and I hope I never do. Until I'm old, then I don't mind it. But if this woman's life did flash before her eyes, most of her memories would just be her almost dying anyway. Then her actually dying, maybe. I was gonna propose maybe wrapping her in bubble wrap, taking her license away, making sure she never goes to the woods again, but she's made it this far, so I guess she's doing something right. Anyway, next story. I used to do a lot of drugs when I was a teen. Mostly pills, but literally all the pills I could find. Uppers, downers, anything. Well, anyways, I had gone on that way for almost a year of doing drugs, daily. Finally, it came to a head. One day I woke up and felt nauseous. Told my mom I wasn't going to school because I thought I had a stomach bug. I basically spent all day crawling back and forth to the bathroom to vomit. I was so dehydrated that I couldn't walk or I would pass out. I remember my mom came home from work and I was pretty much unresponsive. Her and my stepdad carried me to the car and rushed me to the ER. All of my family showed up too. Sitting in the waiting room, I remember feeling a weird sense of peace. I was obviously very depressed at the time, so death didn't scare me all that much. I'm not sure if it was a hallucination or what, but I swear I could feel my soul slowly leaving my body. I could feel it in my fingertips. It was like it was just slowly fading away from me. Somehow my brain just told me, "Yup, that's your soul leaving your body. You're gonna die soon." In the end, I ended up okay, but the doctors told me I was so dehydrated that my organs were starting to fail. Spent 2 weeks in the ICU and miraculously recovered. I have some sort of PTSD kind of thing when I get sick to my stomach. I always feel like I'm gonna die again. Doctors and nurses were baffled. They told me there was no way I should have recovered that quickly. Glad all this is behind me now, but I still think about it every now and again. Now, when I think about death, it's rather scary because there would be so much I'd be leaving behind. Time really does change perspective. Also, PSA, please stay hydrated. I literally drink so much water now, it's not even funny. Next story. So, not my story, rather my son's. 6 years ago, when he was 5, he went to a kindergarten graduation swim party. I had to work overtime, and my wife stayed home with our then infant daughter. Our son was with trusted parents, friends from his school. We got the call that our son had drowned. They pulled him out of the pool, not breathing, no pulse, etc. The parents hosting the party called 911 and got an ambulance on the way. Luckily, one of the mothers had just renewed her pediatric CPR license the day prior and started CPR. She was able to resuscitate my son just prior to the medics arriving. After a few hours in the hospital and numerous tests taken, we were cleared to come home and relax. But to the OP's question, when asked what happened, my son's response was, "I jumped in the pool, Daddy. I didn't have my floaties and I didn't know it was that deep in the end. I couldn't get to the surface, so I got tired and I fell asleep." The mom hosting the party later came by the hospital, apologized profusely, gave my son a gift bag full of toys, coloring books, etc., and a separate bag for me containing a bottle of Jack Daniels. Needless to say, that bottle got polished off as soon as we got home. 6 years later, though, the kid's still healthy and a smart ass. Still loves to go swimming. Little bastard asked to go swimming the next weekend after his accident. And he did, much to his mother's dismay, but what's the saying? When you fall off the horse, you get up, brush yourself off, and get right back on, right? Now I'm off to go wake up my 11-year-old, give him a hug, and then go have a smoke and a drink. Next story. I got extremely sick after a trip to the Amazon rainforest. I remember looking in the mirror and all the color had drained from my already pale face. I had black circles under my eyes, I couldn't stand up, I couldn't talk to anyone. Anytime I tried, it was incoherent and so slow. I couldn't really form thoughts, but remember two very clear, calm thoughts. First, I looked like a zombie. Second, then laying face down in the back of a car on the way to the emergency room, I remember just calmly thinking, I might die. And both thoughts were just very vague and slight interest and surprise. Next story. Why the F aren't you getting help? Press the panic button, what the hell? You see, a nurse was supposed to inject antibiotics into my IV, ended up injecting something else. I was mid-conversation with her when I suddenly couldn't speak or breathe. My eyelids closed slowly despite trying to keep them open, and then I couldn't hold my head up. I was fully cognizant, but she just sat there repeating my name and shaking me slightly, trying to get me to respond. She eventually ran down the hallway and yelled for help. Some people rushed in and got me breathing again. And I asked her, why didn't she hit the panic/alarm button? She said, "I didn't want everyone to come running." Well, I did. I sure the F did. They refused to tell me what was actually injected, and instead tried to tell me I probably had a panic attack because I was nervous about the injection. It was my third day in the hospital after having broken my femur in a skydiving accident. I'd already received several such injections since my surgery. I know it wasn't a panic attack. Next story. I was 15 and my mom sent my sister and I on a family trip with my dad and his side of the family. We'd gone to a beach that had been totally dedicated to water sports. My cousin, sister, and my dad all wanted to go to the banana boat first. We all went flying off on one of them, and I can't remember where I was sitting. I think the middle? Anyway, the boat comes back around to collect us, and my dad, he used my head to push himself onto the banana boat and pushed me under the water, and thus under the stupid inflatable banana. My thought was, I can't believe my dad just did that. I'm actually going to die underneath a giant banana. Luckily, I managed to claw myself out like a demented goblin. Next story. I was wondering if I should tell the person driving me to the ER to tell my family that I effing hate them and I have my whole life, or to tell them that I loved them. I chose love. I wasn't going to be the one who had to live with whatever my parting words were, so why not offer a kind lie? Yeah, sure, I'd go to the grave with no one knowing how I really felt, but it was better than going to the grave with hatred being the last thing I put out into the world. I never wanted to be like my family, and in that moment, I decided to die being exactly the person I wanted to be, and not the person that they almost made me. Next story. I hope my kids will be okay without me. I was legit 5 to 10 seconds away from drowning in white water. Unbeknownst to me, my vest was not rated for white water and I was pushed to the bottom of the river and dragged along by the insane current. When I knew I was done, that was my last complete thought. Everything else was brief flashes of surprisingly calm emotions. I basically stopped fighting and let it happen. That's ultimately what saved my life. Not fighting allowed me a bit longer with the limited oxygen left in my blood. The river continued to drag me along the bottom. Then suddenly the current changed and it shot me back up approximately 20 feet to the surface. I struggled to swim to shore while coughing up water. Once I knew the most immediate danger was a few feet behind me, I laid in the water trying to catch my breath. It's funny to me now though. I used to think shipwreck scenes in films were ridiculous. Surely the person who nearly drowned would drag themselves completely out of the water just to be safe. But it's absolutely like what you see in film. Once the immediate threat is gone, you lie in the shallow water trying to be human again. While I've had other near-death experiences, I didn't know how close to death I was at those times. This one, I knew. I was absolutely certain it was all over. As a result, the next 6 months were the best of my life. My depression was practically cured. My anxiety had no power over me. I knew how bad it could be and how much better things were. Sadly, though, that doesn't last forever. Mental illness always catches back up. Next story. I was almost killed by a man I was in a relationship with when I was in my early 20s. He was watching his kids from a previous relationship, maybe 4 and 6, while his ex was at a conference. I called to check in on him and the kids, but he wasn't answering his phone. I got worried and I went over to the house. He was profoundly drunk. So I put the kids to bed and confronted him about how irresponsible it was to get so inebriated while he was the only adult around. What if there had been an emergency? We got into a huge fight that culminated in him strangling me on the kitchen floor. Right near the end, before I lost consciousness, I very clearly and distinctly thought, wow, this is how it ends. I wonder if he'll have the presence of mind to get rid of my body before the kids wake up in the morning. I wonder if they'll ever find me. And I woke up an indeterminate amount of time later. He clearly didn't hang on long enough to finish the job, so I barricaded myself in the hallway to the kids' room because I couldn't just leave them with him alone. When he woke up in the morning, he asked me why his arms were scratched up and why I had so many bruises. He said he had no recollection of the fight. Next story. Well, I had a near-death experience where my consciousness was removed from my physical body and I was hyper-aware of everything, including the fact that I had just been killed. My thoughts before the impact were mother effer as I realized while careening into the triaxle and trailer of the semi coming towards me that he hadn't been radioing his KMs on the private radio-controlled ice road that we were operating on. Now, it's a narrow, winding snow and ice road that requires radio communication on a specific frequency for obvious safety reasons. He was either not calling his KMS or on the wrong frequency entirely. Either way, I had no idea and no way to know he was coming. I came around a blind corner that he was using every inch of and was annihilated. Cue reality turning into a vibration and me being sucked out of my body and into the void. I knew I was dead, but I was immensely comfortable and not bothered by it. I went through a sort of rapid, self-reflective analysis of different aspects of my life leading up to that point, and when I got to the present, I felt remorse for the way my relationship with my wife had devolved, working away from home to support the family instead of being with them, and how ultimately it would be for me to just die in a busted-up pickup truck in a frozen wasteland. I didn't even get to say goodbye, and I was now gone, and my heart broke knowing how hard this was going to be for my family, and my friends as well. As I was processing these thoughts, a large oval of light appeared somewhere in front of me, and when I focused on it, I could see that I was seeing what was the inside of my truck from the perspective of my slumped-over body. Where my head was pointing, I could see my cell phone on the floor of my truck, and when I noticed it, I had a thought that if I could just get to the cell phone, I could call my wife, tell her I love her, and the kids, and say goodbye. As I thought this, I was yanked forward into the light and was suddenly back inside my body, whereas I started to regain some function and animalistic awareness again. I quickly realized that I was back, and that if I called anyone, they'd be listening to me bleed out and die no matter my intention. That would be traumatic as F. Instead, I gritted my teeth, reached into the burger meat that was left of my leg, and began pulling on jeans and flesh until it came flopping out of the pedals it had been crushed by. I had just redone a safety course on describing how people are unable to apply enough pressure to themselves to effectively staunch bleeding with severe laceration or compound fractures due to the pain it causes, but thought to myself, F that, I've come this far, I'm squeezing. So I squeezed and screamed until others arrived and were able to help extricate me from the wreck. A first aid attendant proved herself unqualified as she went into full-blown panic mode saying actual grievous injury, and only with the help of a security guard simply wrapped my leg despite several requests for me to splint it. So for the next 300 kilometers before meeting a real ambulance, I got to bounce around with bones grinding on one another in the back of a covered pickup bed, freezing and fighting shock. Anyways, in summary, broken tibia, severed Achilles, multiple lacerations, punctures and crushing injuries, fractured hip, compressed spine, sprained wrist, and whatever else that by comparison isn't noteworthy. After a bunch of surgeries and a lengthy hospital stay, I'm alive. Existence is pain and has worn me down to a shell of my former self. There's no happy ending. I've spent 6 years in pain and lost everything that I am and all that matters to me. My only solace is that one day I'll be dead again and will know it's better to embrace it this time around. I've been an atheist my whole life, and this experience has expanded that viewpoint which used to be death is the end, just nothingness like before you were born. I didn't see anything to say there's a god or anything along those lines, but I'm convinced by my experience that there's more to consciousness. and that this reality is less real than the one that I briefly experienced outside of my objective perception of this shared reality we're collectively a part of here. It has turned me into that douchey guy that is not religious but is spiritual. But thank you all for coming to my TED Talk. Next story. I made a self-unaliving attempt a few years ago. I attempted to overdose and died briefly on the way to the hospital. I only remember the moment before passing out from the chemical overload. I think I'm ready. I hope there isn't an afterlife because I'd be effed. But I don't want to be floating in nothing. Then I remember floating in space. Just total blackness without feeling, thought, or form. I was an eternal observer to the nothingness. I know in hindsight it was a dream or maybe just a hallucination from the shock, but thankfully I don't intend to repeat the experience anytime soon no matter how surreal. Next story. My brother, who is very sadly terminally ill, we've recently learned, after a lifetime of struggles, fought heroin addiction for the past 2 decades. He has overdosed many times, but once, while he was living at my apartment and I was off at work, he recounted how the Narcan saved him, yet again. But this was the closest he got to falling out. He said, "You can feel it. You can feel yourself dying, and you have to actually actively fight to hang on. Like fighting being the most tired you've ever been. But you know, and if you let it go, you go." And that shook me to the core. I always worried if I'd find him stiff. Amazingly enough, dude has fought and won against every odd, and now cancer just won't let him get a final W. Next story. As a Christian, this is my perspective on the event, so please just bear with me. Totally get it if it's not your thing, that's fine, that's cool. Let's just agree to disagree. Thank you. So, on New Year's Eve 2013, I was being driven by my parents because I started having severe chest pains and shortness of breath. We were super close to the hospital, and I knew calling an ambulance was going to be a bigger problem just by waiting for one. So anywho, on my way there, I felt total peace about it all. I've already accepted a long time ago when I was in the military to be comfortable with the idea of my death. I have no reason to fear it at this point. I felt an absolute calm thinking that this is my transition to my heavenly home. And it's euphoric and serene. I momentarily felt a bit of sadness because I could hear my parents sounding very anxious, obviously. My mom is driving, and I feel for her the most because here is the greatest woman in my life who is probably going to see my end, and she was there in the beginning. At that point, I knew there was probably nothing I could do but just accept the situation. I go to the ER, and long story short, I'm here typing this and was diagnosed with a lifelong heart and lung disease. Life has a way of proving you wrong. Next story. Had a severe eating disorder as a teen. Was admitted to the hospital after my legs stopped working. Bradycardia, low blood pressure, anemia, and in the early stages of hypothermia. In the middle of the first night, my heart dipped below 20 BPM. I remember a definitive shift between being asleep and not being anything. It was like being nothing but a pair of eyeballs in a black plane, but with even less sensation. No thought, no perception of direction, but nevertheless, the feelings of being drawn forward as through in a current. It's hard to verbalize, and nothing has felt like that before or after. Next story. I was walking on a frozen lake, and I didn't realize how thin the ice was. My dad yelled at me and said, "What the hell are you doing?" And I got scared and turned around, slipped, and fell. The ice started to break, and the first thing I started doing was looking at the sky, thinking, wow, what a dumbass I am, because people who go under the ice go into frozen panic and get stuck under it and drown. So I snapped out of panic and started crawling and eventually got running. And I tell you, the ice cracked and I grabbed onto dear life for a branch on the side of the hill that the lake was in. And the ice? It was 9 inches thick. I realized if I had not have ran, I would have drowned. So my last thoughts were, why so young? Why couldn't I have made it to 80? But I'm here, I'm alive, and I'm well. And I hope everyone else has a great rest of their day. Next story. Broke my leg in a place where nobody was able to find me. And I was there for 5 days, unable to move. I also had a nasty shoulder wound which started to get infected as time went on. I had a jug of water in my bag luckily, so I didn't die of thirst, but near the end I was also running out of that water. It's important to note that I was already very hungry when this began. And what was going through my mind? I think I somewhat accepted my fate on the second day, and it was almost like, F it, man, let's get this over with. I didn't want to die, but I felt like it was inevitable, and if I am going to die, I didn't want to be it from starvation or a slowly growing infection. But that was the first day. By the second day, I remember my mind sort of going to food entirely. By the third day, it was the only thing on my mind. I remember just thinking non-stop about how much I wanted food, any food at all. It was like psychosis. You tried thinking of something else, but your mind just zapped right back to food. The fourth day was just torment. I can't even describe it. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. The physical pain is unimaginable, but the mental anguish is insane. It's funny because the wanting to self-unalive thoughts I had before were somewhat gone. Instead, replaced by the desire to eat food, anything. Like, I don't want to die, not before I eat some food, then I can die. I ended up being discovered by some lady who lived relatively nearby. She fed me some food and got her son to help me. I was taken to a medic camp and put on an IV and recuperated. Next story. I was lucky enough to have my wife and kids with me after a botched surgery. I had internal bleeding throughout my chest and abdomen, and the pain was beyond words, but they sent me home thinking I was in the clear. I collapsed at home from the pain, and my wife called the ambulance, and as we sat there together by the front door, my thoughts were all about trying to comfort my wife and my kids. Just holding them and saying things between short breaths like, "It's okay, buddy. I'm gonna be okay. While I'm in the hospital, you're the man of the house. I'm very proud of you." Even when the emergency surgery team was preparing me and telling me that it might be the last time to say goodbye, I didn't say goodbye. I just kept reassuring them. And I think that helped reassure me in a way. Maybe it made my body fight harder. They opened me up and had to take quite a lot of my intestines out to get the damage, but it was successful. And I got a nice long scar from the top of my groin to my chest. That curved around the belly button, by the way, so at least I got to keep that. Next story. I was doing scuba diving, and due to some unfortunate coincidences, a slightly defective regulator valve, and my own inexperience, I came very close to suffocating. I think the term is hypoxia. As my CO2 level rose, I remember I was thinking slowly. So very slowly. I remember slowly pondering in my mind if it was a good idea to probably warn the instructor I was going to die. I remember thinking about dying, how bothersome it would be. Probably might not be worth the hassle. So slowly reached for my tank, banged on it a couple of times to make noise, and made the trouble and no air sign. My instructor immediately rushed to me and started our emergency resurface, and I remember how absolutely odd it felt that someone was actually that bothered by my incoming death. I could hear my own lungs scratching with every breath, and it was surreal, but actually, I felt incredibly calm. I actually don't think I've felt that calm in my life ever. And yeah, I thought dying in the ocean isn't that bad. And just as the instructor pushed their own regulator in my mouth to share during the rise to the surface, I remember my last dying thought being a curious and instructing experience death was probably going to be. Everything else from there, the moment I had oxygen again, is hazy and I just can't remember at all. But those 3 to 4 minutes are so clear and so vivid. Next story. So I got in a car crash with my dad after my 12th birthday. We were coming back from Disneyland and a semi-truck T-boned us, hitting the driver's side. We flipped a few times, and surprisingly, I didn't pass out or anything. I felt everything, and realizing I might get stuck and maybe die, I tried my very best to just stay strong. All the cuts, bruises, all of the pain I felt was unbearable. Not gonna lie, I thought about all of the action movies and how tough they were, so I tried to push through everything, just push it out of the way. I tried getting out, and I made it luckily. My dad, though, may he rest in peace. Love your life. Live it happily because you'll never know what can happen even at the best of times. Next story. I got T-boned by an SUV when I was riding my motorcycle with my then girlfriend on the back. Guy was like 20 years old, mom's car, insurance. I was 21. I remember just turning my head left and seeing it about to hit and just accepting it was gonna happen. Didn't tell or anything, was strange, mellow reaction. I didn't think about I could die or it would hurt. I even got my phone out and snapped a picture of the scene afterwards after I came to a stop after flying off. Even texted my mom saying I was in an accident, but I'm okay. Really got religious again after that day, that my mom actually showed up before the firefighters somehow, knowing exactly where I was. Said the Lord guided her. I had so much adrenaline, I didn't need pain meds on the ambulance ride, and they told me I probably didn't break anything if I didn't need pain meds. Definitely asking for it at the hospital and got morphine before they cleared me out, and it still hurt like crazy. Overall, pretty blessed I'm alive. Then only injury was my left ankle. I think when the SUV hit my side, my foot peg went through my ankle, and then I got thrown off, so it gouged out a fat rift across my foot about the middle to the back, and somehow stopped right at my Achilles tendon, literally touching it. Somehow didn't break it. But yeah, foot was kinda hanging off. Got another bike December after 2 years from recovery and insurance stuff. I wear like $2,000 worth of gear now, including $300 race boots that probably would have saved me from this nice scar and lifelong injury. Still hurts randomly. I think it's nerves though. Gets less frequent and winter sucks with the screws, more painful. Next story. I don't know if this counts, but I know in the moment he wouldn't have stopped on his own accord. My ex tried to strangle me. For the first 20 seconds or so, hard to tell about time in that moment, seemed to last forever, I was actually content. I didn't fight because it meant my life with him would finally be over. and I would be free of him. But then logic hit me. I remembered my kids were in the other room, and if I died, he'd have them at least until he was caught. So I fought him off. But over 6 years later, I still remember that calm feeling. Next story. On my birthday, my boyfriend was taking me to get dinner, and we got pit maneuvered by an 18-wheeler who claimed he didn't see us before merging to the right. We were in an old two-door Mustang short car, and we were pushed by the semi nearly 50 feet. And I just remember seeing the grill of the semi a foot away from his head, knowing we couldn't do anything till we got stopped. Thankfully, we didn't flip, but I was just hoping I wasn't going to die on my birthday. And surprisingly, we had 0 injuries, and his mom picked us up and got us drive-through Fazoli's, and we went back home. Okay, everybody, let's just give a shout out to Fazoli's because I don't know what those are. I'm sorry. I've heard it before. I don't know what they are. But anyway, so not surprising, this was a bit of a morbid video, but I always try to leave people with a smile on their face or a little bit happiness. Some videos that's harder than others. But one thing we can all take pride in is that 90% of the people in this video survived. And it's also been mentioned a few times on a more serious note, just enjoy your life. Be loving. Share love. Have love. Find love in something. Enjoy nature. Touch grass isn't even an insult to me anymore. It's an encouragement. I love grass. I won't eat it though. I'm not a cow. I'm not Rue at the end of Euphoria. I don't know if y'all saw the finale, but like, did she come back as the cow? Is she Moo Bennett? Because I feel like she is. Someone will get that reference in the comments, I hope. Euphoria ended. I'm recording this the day after. I'm gonna miss that show. It was a mess. But anyway, I'm gonna miss you guys, but we'll be back soon with another video. So thank you all so much for watching, commenting, and have a good one. Bye-bye!